Have you ever had a blind date? Ever hooked up on Tinder? What if something completely terrible happened on one of those dates? In today's case, we go into a story where Grace Millane hooked up on Tinder and her worst fears came true. Welcome to Forever Haunted. I'm Eve S. Evans, paranormal author. Today we're going into a story about Grace Millane, and we're going to travel to New Zealand. Are you ready? Here we go. Grace Millane was from Wickford, Essex. She had recently graduated from the University of Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing, and was on a backpacking tour during her gap year. Millane was on a 2-week stay in New Zealand after spending 6 weeks in South America. She entered New Zealand on November 20th, 2018, and traveled around the Upper North Island. She arrived in Auckland on November 30th. At 9 p.m. on December 1st, she was seen in Victoria Street in Auckland's Central Business District, and 15 minutes later, she was seen via CCTV at Sky City. She was last seen at 9:41 p.m. at the City Life Hotel on Queen Street with S Kempson. Millane's parents became concerned after she did not reply to birthday wishes they sent her on December 2nd, 2018, and police started investigating after she was reported missing by her parents 3 days later. The hotel she was staying at reported that she did not go back to her room on the night of her disappearance. Police initially said that there is no evidence of foul play, but later gathered evidence that she was no longer alive. Police announced on December 8th that they were treating the case as a homicide investigation, and Kempson was subsequently charged with her murder. Millane's body was found on December 9th at around 4 p.m. off Scenic Drive in the Waitākere Ranges, around 19 kilometers, which is 12 miles, west of central Auckland. A post-mortem examination was done on December 10th. Further investigations of the area where Millane was found were carried out on December 11th. Police asked for the public's help in finding a shovel they believe was related to the inquiry. A shovel fitting the police description was found on December 13th. Police also requested public help tracing the movements of a rental car Kempson leased between December 2nd and 3rd. The car had subsequently been released and was located on December 8th in Taupo, 275 kilometers, which is 171 miles, south of Auckland. Kempson, 26 years old, was taken into custody on December 8th at 3 p.m. He had been staying at the City Life Hotel in the central Auckland. Kempson appeared in the Auckland District Court on December 10th, 2018, charged with murdering Millane. Kempson was born and grew up in Wellington Region. After his parents separated when he was 9, he was raised by his father and grandfather. His mother moved overseas while his father remarried and had a blended family. At Ottawa College, Kempson played softball at a regional representative level for multiple teams. He worked as a bartender and builder-laborer, and also lived in Sydney, Australia, between 2013 and 2016. Kempson was estranged from his family. He also had a drunk driving conviction in New Zealand and had been arrested for disorderly behavior in Auckland and Sydney. Kempson's paternal grandfather also alleged that he had fathered a child while living in Sydney, but this is disputed by other relatives. During the initial appearance, Kempson was denied name suppression, but this was appealed by the defense, automatically triggering interim name suppression for a period of 20 working days. The suppression order could not be enforced against media outlets outside New Zealand, and several outlets, particularly in the United Kingdom, chose to publish Kempson's name. Google included Kempson's name in an email it sent to subscribers of its newsletter on trending topics in New Zealand, which claimed that 100,000 searches had been done of the name within the country. Justice Minister Andrew Little and the New Zealand Bar Association criticized the foreign media, saying the publication of Kempson's name endangered his right to a fair trial. Kempson was remanded in custody and appeared in Auckland High Court on January 16, 2019, where he pleaded not guilty. His identity remained suppressed pending an appeal. The appeal was heard at the High Court on February 7th. The judge reserved his decision, meaning the order remained in force until the decision was released. New Zealand police investigated a number of alleged breaches of the name suppression order. In February 2020, an Auckland businessman was prosecuted for such a breach. After initially entering a plea of not guilty, the businessman changed his plea to guilty in June 2020. In April 2021, he was sentenced to 350 hours of community service and a $15,000 fine. Kempson was formally identified on December 22, 2020, after the Supreme Court of New Zealand rejected his appeal for continued name suppression. It was also disclosed that Kempson had been convicted of 9 total charges of rape, sexual violation, threatening to kill, and assault in 2 sexual violence trials before a judge in October and November 2020 that were independent of Millane's case. Millane's death generated an unprecedented reaction for the New Zealand public. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a public apology to the family of Millane on December 10th, saying, "On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologize. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't." During the press conference, she appeared to be close to tears.
Firstly, I cannot imagine the grief of her family and what they will be experiencing and feeling right now. And my thoughts and prayers are with her father, David, who is in the country, her mother, Gillian, who cannot be here, and her wider family, friends, and loved ones. You know, from the Kiwis I have spoken to, there is this overwhelming sense of hurt and shame that this has happened in our country, a place that prides itself on our hospitality, on our manaakitanga, especially to those who are visiting our shores. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that. I've advised the family through the police that if there is anything we can do to assist, we are here to help with that.
The University of Lincoln, where Millane studied, said that its community was deeply saddened by her death. Auckland Sky Tower and Harbour Bridge were lit up in a white ribbon shape from December 10th to 13th to mark her death. Candlelight vigils were held December 11th and 12th at several locations around New Zealand. Journalists Alison Ma and Paul Little criticized the media coverage as an example of missing white woman syndrome, where significantly more media attention is given to typically white, conventionally attractive females from middle-class backgrounds who are depicted as innocent and angelic. On January 10, 2019, hundreds turned out for Millane's funeral at Brentwood Cathedral in Essex. In November 2019, Radio New Zealand broadcaster Colin Peacock criticized the conduct of some foreign media in both the Grace Millane and the concurrent Amber Rose Rush murder trials, arguing that their breaches of New Zealand name suppression orders threaten the fair trial rights for defendants. Meanwhile, the Otago Daily Times editorialized the Millane murder case highlighted the fact that in New Zealand, women were statistically more likely to be victims of violent crimes than men. In late February 2020, The Guardian's Cian Norris described using rough sex as a murder defense as grotesque victim blaming. The trial began on November 4, 2019, with the selection of the jury. Kempson reaffirmed his earlier not guilty plea, with proceedings expected to last 5 weeks. The prosecution, led by Crown Solicitor Brian Dickey, argued that Kempson had strangled Millane to death following a Tinder date. The Crown also testified that after killing her, Kempson conducted several internet searches on how to dispose of bodies, as well as viewing pornography. Dickey also said Kempson calmly and callously disposed of Millane's body and other evidence, and then created a labyrinth of storytelling and lies to cover his tracks. Data showed the defendant had searched online about rigor mortis before browsing websites for large duffel bags, suitcases, and car hire. His phone was also used to search for flesh-eating birds and are there vultures in New Zealand? Days later, on December 5th, 2018. Records showed the defendant had searched online for the hottest fire, large bags near me, and Waitākere Ranges, where Mrs. Millane's body was later found contorted inside a suitcase on December 9th, 2018. The trial also sat through heartbreaking footage of backpacker Grace's last hours alive. With her parents watching from the public gallery, backpacker Grace was shown taking a picture of a Christmas tree in New Zealand casino, which she sent to them while waiting to meet the alleged killer for the first time. 3 female witnesses whom Kempson had also met through Tinder testified that he liked masochistic and bondage sex, including choking. The Crown also presented security camera footage of Kempson and Millane, including his renting a carpet cleaning machine at the Countdown supermarket in Quay Street. A Crown expert witness, pathologist Simon Stables, testified that post-mortem examination of Millane's body had found bruising consistent with someone who had been restrained and asphyxiated. Millane's post-mortem blood alcohol concentration was measured at 106 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood, over the legal driving limit of 50 milligrams per 100 milliliters. The defense team, led by Ian Brookie, argued that Millane's death was the result of a consensual sexual misadventure between Kempson and Millane. They alleged that Millane had an interest in bondage and sadomasochism and had asked Kempson to choke her during a consensual sex game, which went wrong. While acknowledging that Kempson had tried to hide and bury the victim's body, they contended that he had panicked. The defense expert witness, pathologist Fintan Garvin, contested the Crown's autopsy evidence, claiming that her injuries were consistent with a consensual sex act due to the lack of defensive wounds on Millane's body. Garvin also alleged that the victim's alcohol consumption could have been contributed to her death. Defense lawyer Ron Mansfield also argued that Kempson's claiming to be wealthy and successful stemmed from his personal insecurity. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury, which consisted of 7 women and 5 men, returned a verdict of guilty. On November 22, 2019, after deliberating for 5 hours, the verdict was welcomed by Millane's parents, David, who subsequently died of cancer in November 2020, and Jillian. Several members of the jury reportedly wept following the verdict.
You'll have to forgive me because I'm not very good at this. The verdict of murder today will be welcomed by every member of the Millane family and friends of Grace. It will not reduce the pain, the suffering that we've had to endure for over the past year. Can't see it. Grace was taken away from us in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives and family have been ripped apart. This will be with us for the rest of our lives. Grace was a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Grace was our sunshine, and she will be missed forever. She did not deserve to be murdered in such a barbaric way on her only year.
In New Zealand, murder carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years, except when such a sentence would be manifestly unjust. For example, mercy killings. Judges have discretion to order a longer non-parole period. On February 21, 2020, Kempson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. On March 18th, it was reported that Kempson would appeal his conviction and sentence at Court of Appeal. The appeal hearing began in Auckland on August 6th. On December 18, 2020, the Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal, although the Supreme Court ordered that the name suppression should remain in place until a further court order. That same day, it was reported that taxpayers had paid more than $400,000 in Kempson's legal aid. On June 29, 2021, the Supreme Court dismissed Kempson's application for leave to appeal the verdict, thereby exhausting his legal avenues to overturn his conviction. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Forever Haunted. I know today's episode was a little difficult, a little crazy. It makes you think twice about going on that blind date, right? Stay tuned to next week for an all-new true crime episode.